I think most people here are probably really familiar with Shazam. It was one of the first apps that was really, really popular on the App Store, pretty early on. And I think this was coming at a point when, a lot of people weren't really sure what a mobile app was supposed to do or how it was supposed to look. And, so I think most of us are familiar from that point of view. But, one of the cool things is that, from all this time, Shazam's never really stopped being useful. So I'm kind of curious, if you could talk a little bit about how Shazam's managed to stay relevant all these years later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Shazam history is pretty fascinating. Most people don't realize the company is 15 years old, and it predates the iPhone, obviously, by quite a ways. You used to be able to dial 2580 on your feature phone, hold it up. So it was smart little gimmick. You dial down the middle, and you'd hold it up to the speaker, and it would figure out what song is playing and text you the name of the song, which is brilliant from a user perspective and disastrous from a revenue perspective because there wasn't any. And then the iPhone came out. So you kind of saw the graph do this for a while, and it was going all right. And then the iPhone came out, and everything changed, and it literally went vertical on the Shazamming activity. Shazam was featured in an Apple advertisement on TV. So I guess my key lesson for all of you is try to get your shit featured in an Apple advertisement, because that worked really well. But I guess you can't always plan those things. But yeah, I'll show you a couple little slides just so you can see the growth. We're at 120 million monthly actives right now, which is a lot of people Shazamming. It's about 20 million Shazams a day. And we've had 20 billion Shazams since the start of Shazam as a product. And I think it's really easy to think of it as just that pure utility the whole time, because it's lovely. It's a quick utility. How many of you guys use it, by the way? How many of you use Shazam? Good answer. So it's great as that utility, but I think what we really realized in the process is that it can be a bit more than that. That when you use each of those and think of them each as a data point, together they become really powerful. Have you guys heard All About That Bass by Meghan Trainor? She's amazing. She's had like 5 hits already. It's only been about a year. But this is the graph for her first big hit, All About That Bass. And what you can see is that the Shazamming activity kind of came really early. And it predated sales. So you can see it went vertical the day it showed up on iTunes on sales. And then even that predated radio. And so it's given us a really early signal into how artists take off and how music takes off. And so you think you're just Shazamming, an innocent little thing, point your phone at the speaker, but actually all of these data points become an incredible predictive ability. And then the other thing we realized along the way is that it's also a very big signal. So when you Shazam, you kind of build a follower relationship with an artist. And it's unsurprising, right? If I told you guys when you Shazammed an artist that I would then tell you when they come out with a new album or tell you when they come on tour near you, you'd probably go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I would expect that. Well, when we look at the number of followers that folks have, that artists have on Shazam, it's just mind-boggling, and it frequently is more followers than they have anywhere else. And I guess that's the power of being there early. Now, this doesn't apply to everyone. If you're Shakira, you're killing it on Facebook. You have 100 million followers on Facebook. So you don't have 100 million followers on Shazam. She has about 20 million. But nevertheless, this is a story that's true over and over and over again. So it's been a really interesting journey that started with dialing down the middle on your phone and not making us any money.
So at what point did you guys realize that, that you had, that this was going on, that, hey, we can actually see that, this person's like gonna have a really, this song's gonna be big in 6 months. I mean, yeah. That was not something you guys were expecting at the time, right?
No, I mean, I don't think, I'd love to, when you retell a story of a company, you always try to pretend like you knew everything was gonna happen all along, and it was all part of the plan. It wasn't all part of the plan. But I think it's been actually over the last couple of years that we've started looking at the data not through the lens of individual user activity, but in aggregate and what it means for the music industry. And Shazam has become almost an essential part of how radio stations and labels take their steps. Demi Lovato did this. Do you guys know Demi Lovato? Always depends on the audience. Okay, Demi Lovato's big, and if you were a teenage girl, you'd be raising your hand right now. She had this great little thing she did with us where she wanted to figure out where to go on tour. So she had people Shazam her. And she said, well, that's just going to help me decide where I'm going to go on tour, because obviously you all like me because you're Shazamming me. And so over 2 days, she got Shazammed about 2 million times. And we just looked at the lat long, the geo coordinates of where she was being Shazammed, and we sent her the data, and she chose her tour locations based on that. There were quite a few really interesting surprise locations as a result. But what we've seen kind of along the way is that it's unsurprising, but the biggest artists are also the biggest fans. So the people who are Shazamming the most are artists. They all use it. They use it in the same way you and I use it. They hear something they like, and they rush to Shazam it before the song's over. The difference is, no offense to any of you, but the music you're Shazamming is probably not quite as distinctive as the music they're Shazamming. And they're able to find stuff that literally nobody's heard, which is pretty wild. So we did this thing recently where we made it so that you could actually see what the artists themselves are Shazamming. So if you're following Pitbull, you can now see what Pitbull's Shazamming. Tovlo did something kind of cute. She Shazammed herself. Okay, that's a little narcissistic, but she was at a bar. She was at a bar and she heard a remix of her own song that she hadn't heard in public before, so she Shazammed it. That's kind of cool. So we're starting to play into this follower model. But as you were saying, that early signal around artists has become really valuable. Have you guys heard of Milky Chance? Okay. Awesome. I mean, one of my favorite artists. So Milky Chance, this is the story of Milky Chance on Shazam. We essentially, to your point, kind of have 3 lists that we keep track of for artists. One is what we call the watch list. That's when we notice some sort of spike in activity that's worth paying attention to. But it's too early, and it can be literally a few hundred Shazams that's enough. Sometimes it's just dozens of Shazams that's enough for us to notice it. The second list is the trending list. At that point, I'd be willing to bet your money that this artist is going to go well. I'm not quite sure I'd bet my money on it yet, but this artist is doing well. And then lastly, we have the hot list, and at that point, where it's an absolute certainty this artist is going to go big. So Milky Chance, if you rewind back to April of 2013, they'd already been getting Shazammed a little bit. I'm not showing you the scale. I'll show you in a minute. But this looks like a healthy amount of activity, and it was kind of steady. And then they uploaded their stuff to YouTube, and 2 days later, our algorithms picked them up on the hot list, or sorry, on the watch list. So we noticed, okay, well, let's just look. That entire graph that I'm showing you right now is actually that tiny little snippet at the beginning. So what looked like a big bump is almost imperceptible when you zoom out. So they kept kind of going along. They didn't even get added to iTunes for another couple months. So by the way, where are they being Shazammed? It's nightclubs, it's DJs, it's beach clubs. There was one location on an island off the side of Madagascar where they were being Shazammed. I looked, it's a beach club. I can't afford to go there, but it's a nice beach club. So then they kept going along and hit our trending lists a few months later. Being added to iTunes helped. Well, that actually, if you zoom out, you can see that it took until July of 2013. So it took them about 3 months to hit our hot list. At that point, we know Milky Chance is big. But have a quick look, because that entire graph that you're looking at right now is that tiny little amount at the beginning there. So that first big, really big bump that you can actually see now is when they got big on the radio in Europe. They're a German band, so they did really well in Europe first. And then what happens with Shazam? Once everybody knows the song, you don't need to Shazam it anymore. So you see that decline start happening. But then they got big in the US. And that's when they really started peaking. So that's the second big, very fat bump there. They peaked on Shazam, and then a couple months later, they peaked on Billboard. Or really, they actually hit the Billboard chart. So it just gives you a sense of that predictability of this innocent little thing that we keep talking about of just pulling your phone out and identifying a song. It's just that when 20 million people do that every single day, you get something quite interesting.
So, I mean, we're talking about adding more social features to follow artists. I mean, that's a fairly recent update. We're talking about these new charts. You know, from the outset, this seems like a fairly big shift in how you think about the product. So I'm curious, what the response has been like so far from your users as you made these fairly significant changes and sort of opened up what you can actually do with the Shazam app.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first the whole impetus for it. So we realized we're a phenomenal utility, But at some point, you never want to become the flashlight app, right? You never just want to be a utility, because at some point, I hope the flashlight app has saved my ass a number of times, so I shouldn't be mean. But you always want to aspire to go play a bigger role in people's lives, and we really wanted to play a bigger role in people's lives. We realized this is where people are discovering music. How do we make it more so? And we also realized at the same time that actually there isn't a great place to follow artists. There isn't a great place to have a music-centric experience that's social in the world today. Bunch of music messaging apps are coming out, but they're tiny, and so they don't have the critical mass of users, and so they struggle to take off. And then a lot of people follow artists on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The trouble is, you see a post by an artist, and then you see something about an airplane crash, and then you see something about a riot, and then you see something, so it's not a musical experience. And so we thought we could probably solve that problem and create more of a destination for discovering music. At the same time, we realized all these artists are using Shazam all the time. I wonder if we could create this connection. And that was really the goal, is could we actually become a better place to discover music, not just when you hear a song you don't recognize, but actually when you're just kind of connecting with artists about the music they care about. So we started with artists because we have this asset being that they actually use the app, which is pretty wild. I hate to break it to you, but when you see an artist post on Twitter, it's not usually the artist. So we managed to solve that problem because we're the app that they're using. So we started with artists by saying, well, what if the artists you're following on Shazam, most users are following about 25 artists, what if you started seeing what they're Shazamming? And we launched that June 30th. And it's been an amazing experience because what we've seen is that users are coming in now to the app when they're not hearing a song that they don't recognize. 25% of our activity is now people coming in not to Shazam. And 25% may not sound like a big number, but when you have 120 million users every month and you're trying to shift their behavior or at least introduce a new behavior, it's incredibly hard to do. So we're pretty excited about that. And we're just getting warmed up. We have a few hundred artists verified right now, but a queue of over 1,000 artists waiting to be verified. So it's going to get pretty exciting.
So one thing that I'm curious about is, as you start thinking about, trying to get more people to open the app when they don't want to just identify a song, what are some things that you think about? I think, for a lot of companies, especially really early on, things kind of become a balance of like, how do you keep people engaged and keep things interesting, but don't get too annoying, don't send them too many notifications. What are some things that you think about in that perspective and making sure that you find that right balance?
Yeah, it's hard, and I don't know that we've found the right balance yet. There's a lot of, I took some notes in the previous presentation, let's put it that way. The real challenge is that there are users who love what you do so much that you can give them as much of it as you possibly can, and they'll love more and more and more of it. So a user that uses Shazam 10 times a day, believe it or not, there are users who use Shazam 10 times a day, you can send them a push notification every 30 minutes, they'll love it. Tell me more, tell me about another song that an artist Shazammed. And that sounds great to them. A user that uses Shazam twice a month is still a valuable user to us. But if I sent them a notification even once a day, they'd get pretty annoyed with it. And so we've started using the user's activity level to guide how often we send them things. That said, if we're too quiet, often the biggest thing we've learned is that often people are using Shazam when they're not in a setting that they're ready to hear our thoughts, right? They're hearing a song, they might be at a nightclub, so we're getting in the way of their game. And they open the app and they hit the Shazam button as quickly as possible. So popping a screen up at that point to say, by the way, did you know you could follow artists and see what they're discovering, is possibly the most annoying thing we could do. So we don't do it. So we are obsessive about not getting in the way of that primary journey, which means that we're relegated to much less effective places to reach people. And I actually appreciate about the company that we haven't been so singularly focused on expanding the use case that we've actually hurt the main use case. We haven't done that, and I think that's really powerful, but it does mean we've had to be quite patient. Push notifications are pretty good, but we've started thinking more carefully about when to send them, not only how frequently. Saturday morning's a pretty good thing. You wake up to a notification from Shazam about something that Maroon 5 Shazammed. Cool. Because you're looking for excuses not to get out of bed. So it's a logical thing to do. So we've been really thinking carefully about what state of mind is the user in, and if they're trying to dance, probably just let them dance.
I think that's something we can all appreciate. Another thing that, do you look at artists as partners in this situation? Do you look at them as someone who can sort of help you guys make your users aware of what you're doing? I mean, what's that relationship like?
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be a win-win. It has to be authentic. So the one thing we've stopped short of doing, we don't pay artists to Shazam. We don't pay artists to engage in the platform. So that has retained the authenticity. It has reduced the number of artists to some extent. Every once in a while you encounter an artist that's like, no, I'm not interested. I don't want to publish. But by and large, what we've seen is that artists are actually really excited to finally communicate with users about music, and that they see that there's a certain element of paying it forward, that they're not mostly Shazamming themselves. They're actually Shazamming other artists. Frequently, they're Shazamming things that have only been ever Shazammed 20 or 30 times. That's almost impossible. Like, you deserve a medal if you ever Shazam anything that's been Shazammed that little. So they do it. They keep finding these things. So they kind of think that it's a bit of a pay it forward component to helping an up and coming artist be discovered. And we've seen what happens. David Guetta Shazammed an artist the other day, and the video views for that artist had a 65x increase in the next 24 hours. So it does make a difference. We're very careful to respect the artists that have taken the time to publish and that have kind of expressed that generosity. We're really careful not to just kind of take all the Shazams from artists, do our own social posts around them, and really kind of use them to our own advantage. We try to be really respectful of them. At the same time, there is a real co-marketing opportunity. So when an artist is about to release a new album, there are some quite cool things they can do with the number of followers they have on Shazam, and we've tried to facilitate that so it feels like a win-win to them.
So going forward, where do you see this going from here? What do you think we all have to look forward to the most? Is it more great discoveries from David Guetta and Shakira and what they're Shazamming, or where do you see this going?
Well, I do think at some point we're going to broaden out from artists to other influencers, and just you and me, so that so you start identifying tastemakers. I think eventually you'll be identifying tastemakers that are not famous, but actually have really good taste in music. I think ultimately, though, we have to go back to the user and what we're trying to do for the user. Let's do a little experiment. How many of you encounter in your day-to-day life, when you're trying to play some music, this feeling of, crap, I want to listen to something, but I don't want to hear the same thing I always listen to? Is that a scenario for you? Still a scenario for you? In a world of YouTube, Google, Spotify, name your service, you still can't think of something new to play? Of course not. We all run into this problem, right? We all run into it. At that moment, you forget all the artists that you'd heard of the previous week, and you just get overwhelmed, and so you type Sam Smith and press play, and nothing wrong with that. But we keep hearing the same thing. The other thing, if we were at a party and I told you about an artist, have you guys heard of George Ezra? By the way, have you heard of George Ezra? He's cool. What would you do? Like right now, I just told you guys, all of you should listen to George Ezra. He's awesome. What do? You forget, right? There's nothing, and you end up emailing yourself, right? At best. Like, technology dropped the ball if that's what you have to do at a party so you can remember George Ezra. We're going to try to solve those problems. We can solve those problems, right? Shazam makes it super easy for you now to search for an artist and follow them. Makes it super easy for you to hear something and keep it. And makes it super easy for you to start listening to music that you might have discovered along the way that'll be a little different from the last thing you listened to. So now, you're all in the US, you can use Pandora. If you go into Shazam, go to the My Shazam list, the last thing you discovered, you thought it was pretty cool at that moment. You just tap one button and you start a Pandora station from it. Trying to kind of build into those scenarios reinforces our existing use case. And then at the same time, we'll bring in these social features that make it so that you start discovering music from others as well.
I think I want you to make my next playlist.
Okay, I'm willing to take you up on that. Start with George Ezra. He's great.
Well, I think we've covered most of the things. Was there anything else? I mean, maybe we could close on this. How do you find your music?
Yeah. I'm not pitching my own product here. I have to say, I suffered from the same problem until very recently. And I'll even admit, I'm not cool enough to go to enough clubs or discover enough new things through the world around me, so I actually don't Shazam all that often. I Shazam probably, in real Shazamming, not like to test my app. I probably Shazam twice a week, where I hear something and I think, oh, that's cool, and I want to Shazam it. So actually, my Shazam list isn't always interesting enough to power this experience. But the artists that I've been following have been Shazamming so much interesting stuff that I find myself constantly like daily, literally, going in and hearing the music. And like anything, if it was Tinder for Shazam, I'd be swiping left a lot. So I do swipe left a lot on the music that even the artists are discovering. But if 1 out of every 5 tracks is kind of cool, and I go, oh, actually, I'll save that one. That one's pretty cool. And that's how lately I've been discovering music. So yeah, give it a shot. See what you guys think.